The maid girl had been working in the large, elegant house for several months. Every morning, she woke up before the sun rose and quietly made her way to the kitchen. The house was filled with rooms that seemed to stretch on forever, with polished wooden floors and chandeliers that caught the morning light. She moved silently, careful not to disturb anyone, sweeping the floors and arranging flowers. Her life was simple and routine, but she found small joys in the quiet moments, like the smell of fresh bread in the morning or the way sunlight fell across the grand staircase. Despite her diligence, the other members of the household often looked down on her. The family she worked for were polite enough when needed, but their polite words often carried a hint of condescension. The children, particularly, would giggle behind her back when she passed, whispering about her plain clothes and simple manners. Sometimes, during meals, she overheard the adults commenting on how a girl like her would never understand the world they lived in. She tried to ignore it, knowing that her place was in the background, but the words stung more than she wanted to admit. She was used to being invisible. She moved through the rooms as if she were part of the furniture, always careful to blend in. Her hands were skilled and quick, capable of polishing silver until it shone and folding napkins with perfect precision. Yet, there was a part of her that felt trapped. She loved music deeply, a love she had carried since she was a child, but it was a secret she had never shared. The piano in the grand living room called to her in quiet moments. Its polished black surface and ivory keys seemed to hold promises of something more, something beyond dusting and sweeping. Most days, she would catch glimpses of it as she passed by. She would hear the distant, careful notes when the children practiced with a teacher, or she might hear the faint sound of a visiting guest playing a melody she did not recognize. Each time, her heart ached with a mix of longing and fear. She knew she was not allowed to touch it, that her place was not in the spotlight. Still, she dreamed quietly of the day she might sit at that piano and let her hands move freely across the keys. The mornings were always the hardest. She would wake with the sun, the cold air of the kitchen brushing against her skin as she lit the stove and began preparing breakfast. She moved with efficiency, chopping vegetables and kneading dough, all while keeping a careful eye on the clock. The family liked things to happen on schedule, and any delay was noticed. She learned quickly to anticipate their needs, pouring the tea before they asked and having their shoes polished before they even thought about leaving. There was a rhythm to her work, a pattern that she had grown comfortable with. The sweeping of floors, the dusting of shelves, the polishing of silver, all became part of a daily dance that she performed silently. She learned to find moments of peace in this routine, letting her mind wander to imagined melodies that played in her head while her hands worked. She would hum softly under her breath, careful not to let anyone hear, the tunes forming in her mind like little secret worlds she could escape to. Sometimes, the family would call her to help with tasks that were outside her normal duties. She would carry trays to the drawing room or run errands into the nearby town. Each time, she would notice how differently people treated her outside the house. In the market, she was just another face in the crowd, but in the house, she felt like she carried a mark that set her apart. She wondered often why she was treated so differently, why her quiet competence and dedication seemed to go unnoticed or even ridiculed. Her interactions with the children were the most complicated. They were not cruel, but they were mischievous, always testing boundaries and seeing how far they could push her patience. They would hide her cleaning supplies or leave her with extra work, laughing when she scolded them gently. She responded with patience, knowing that anger would only make her situation worse. She learned to move around their games, to anticipate their tricks, and to stay calm when they whispered and giggled behind her back. Still, there were moments when she felt the sting of their laughter keenly, moments when she wished she could show them she was more than the girl they thought she was. She had one small friend in the house, an elderly gardener who worked outside tending the flowers and trees. He would sometimes offer her kind words or share a story about the house's past. He noticed the way she lingered near the piano, the way her eyes would light up when music was mentioned. He encouraged her quietly, reminding her that talent was not something to be hidden, even if the world around her did not understand. His words were like a soft breeze, giving her courage she didn't yet fully recognize. Evenings were the hardest. After a long day of work, she would return to her small room, a simple space with just a bed and a few personal belongings. She would wash her hands and face, sit quietly, and sometimes, if she was brave enough, she would hum the melodies that had played in her mind all day. She imagined herself at the piano, fingers moving gracefully across the keys, creating music that would fill the room and perhaps even surprise the people who had laughed at her earlier. These moments were her refuge, the time when she could be herself without judgment or ridicule. She often thought about her life and the choices that had brought her here. She had grown up in a small village, where music was a part of daily life. Her parents had taught her to play, to feel the music, to understand it as something that could speak when words could not. But circumstances had forced her to leave home and take this job in the city, far from the freedom and encouragement she had once known. Still, she carried the lessons with her, tucked into her heart like precious gems that no one could take away. One day, as she polished the dining table before the family arrived for dinner, she overheard a conversation that made her heart tighten. The children were teasing a visiting cousin, whispering about her plain dress and simple manners. She felt a familiar pang of hurt but reminded herself to stay silent. She could not let them see her reaction, could not give them the satisfaction of knowing they had hurt her. Instead, she focused on her work, moving gracefully and efficiently, letting her hands and mind take over as a shield against the harsh words. There was a quiet strength in her, built from months of navigating this world where she was seen but not truly noticed. She had learned to find small victories in her day, whether it was a perfectly polished silver tray, a flower arranged just right, or a melody she had hummed so softly that no one else could hear. These were the moments that reminded her of who she was beyond the labels the world placed on her. At night, before she finally allowed herself to rest, she would stand by the door of the grand living room, looking at the piano. Its black surface gleamed in the dim light, and she could almost hear the notes calling to her. She dreamed of the day she might sit there and play, of the moment when the music would flow from her fingers and fill the room with beauty. It was a dream she held close, a secret hope that kept her going through the long, tiring days. In those quiet moments, she allowed herself to imagine a world where she was seen for her talent, not just her station. She imagined the surprise on faces that had laughed at her, the respect that might replace ridicule, and the joy of sharing something so deeply personal with others. It was a fragile hope, yet it was powerful enough to give her courage, to make her continue her work with grace and dignity despite the daily challenges. As she lay down to sleep, she felt a sense of quiet determination. The laughter and teasing would not define her. She carried something inside her that could not be measured by wealth or status, something that would one day speak for itself. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she held on to the belief that her moment would come, that the world would one day hear the music that had lived in her heart for so long. Until then, she would continue her work, her quiet life, and her secret dreams, knowing that one day, everything could change with the sound of her hands on the piano. The day started like any other. The maid girl moved quietly through the large house, making sure everything was in its place. She swept the floors, polished the silver, and arranged the flowers with careful attention. Her hands were quick and steady, and she took pride in the small things, the little details that made the house sparkle. Even though her work went largely unnoticed, she found satisfaction in doing it well. It was her way of showing herself that she mattered, even if others didn't always see it. But that day felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a gathering in the dining room that promised a crowd. Guests had arrived, people she did not know, dressed in bright clothes and sparkling shoes. The maid girl carried herself with her usual quiet dignity, setting the table and serving refreshments, all while trying not to draw attention to herself. She had grown used to being invisible, but the laughter and chatter in the room made her feel the weight of eyes on her. The children of the house were especially playful that morning. They darted around the table, whispering and giggling as if they had a secret. She tried to ignore them, focusing on the task at hand, but she could feel their curious glances. One of the children leaned over and made a small, mocking comment about her plain dress. Another whispered something that made the first one laugh, and soon a small chorus of giggles followed. She bit her lip, keeping her face calm, but inside, a familiar sting of hurt spread through her. The guests noticed the children's whispers and joined in with quiet chuckles. Some made subtle remarks about her appearance, her manners, and her status in the household. She kept her head down, pretending not to hear, moving with practiced grace as she poured tea and placed plates on the table. Each step she took was careful, precise, as if she were dancing a silent dance that only she could hear. Yet, the laughter continued, growing louder and more confident, as though they could sense her discomfort. Despite the teasing, she held herself with quiet dignity. She had learned over time not to react too quickly, not to give the laughter power over her. She knew that showing anger or embarrassment would only encourage them. Instead, she focused on her work, letting her hands move automatically, polishing silver, arranging flowers, and serving food. She imagined herself elsewhere, somewhere peaceful, where her talents and thoughts were valued, and where no one laughed at her. The teasing escalated when the children decided to make her work part of their game. They placed small obstacles in her way, moving objects just as she reached for them, giggling as she adjusted and continued her work. She moved with patience, careful not to stumble or lose her composure. Her eyes flicked toward the piano in the corner of the room, as if it were a refuge she could escape to, a place where the noise and ridicule could not reach her. The black, polished surface seemed to beckon her, the keys whispering promises of something better, something that belonged to her alone. As she served the final course of the meal, one of the adults made a mocking remark, a cruel joke about her simplicity. Laughter erupted around the table, echoing through the high ceilings of the grand room. She felt her cheeks burn and her throat tighten, but she did not respond. She simply moved on, completing her tasks with calm efficiency. Inside, though, a quiet determination began to form. She would not let their laughter define her. There was something they did not know, something hidden inside her that would one day speak louder than their words. After the meal, she found a moment to collect herself in a quiet hallway. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted a vase of flowers, but she forced a calm smile. She thought about the children's laughter and the adults' whispers. She imagined herself as invisible once more, a shadow in the bright light of their lives. But in her mind, a spark had ignited, a small but determined flame that refused to be extinguished by their mockery. The maid girl moved through the house, completing her tasks with silent precision. She polished the silver again, arranged the cushions on the sofa, and tidied the rooms. Yet her thoughts kept drifting back to the piano. It sat in the living room, elegant and silent, waiting. She longed to sit at it, to let her fingers move across the keys, and release the music that lived inside her. She imagined the sound, soft at first, then growing in strength and beauty, filling the room and overpowering the laughter and ridicule that had followed her all morning. As the afternoon wore on, the household grew busy with preparations for an evening gathering. The maid girl continued her work, but her mind was elsewhere. She imagined the piano again, her fingers dancing across the keys, creating melodies that would surprise everyone. The thought of playing made her heart beat faster, a mix of fear and excitement. She knew it was forbidden, that her place was not at the piano, but the desire to express herself, to show the world a glimpse of who she truly was, grew stronger with each passing hour. The teasing she had endured that morning lingered in her mind, but it no longer felt like a weight. Instead, it became fuel for her determination. She remembered the words of the elderly gardener who had encouraged her quietly, telling her that talent was something that could not remain hidden forever. She realized that this was her moment, the chance to turn the laughter into astonishment, to let the music speak in a way that words never could. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the grand windows, she made her way toward the living room. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and anticipation. She paused at the doorway, looking at the piano, imagining the music that had lived inside her for so long finally being released. She thought about the children's laughter, the adults' condescension, and the way they had underestimated her. She knew that once her fingers touched the keys, everything would change. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, the sound of her footsteps echoing softly in the quiet room. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly, but she forced herself to focus. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to begin. She imagined the notes flowing from her fingers, filling the space with beauty and emotion, captivating everyone who had doubted her. For a moment, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the music before it even began. Then, with a quiet determination, she pressed the first key. The sound resonated through the room, soft and clear. She continued, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys, the music growing stronger and more confident with each note. The sound filled the house, reaching even the far corners, and for the first time that day, she felt a sense of liberation. The laughter and ridicule seemed distant, replaced by the beauty she was creating, a beauty that was entirely her own. As she played, she felt the tension in her body melt away. The teasing and mockery that had weighed on her all morning could not touch her here. She was no longer the girl who was laughed at or underestimated. She was a musician, an artist, a person capable of creating something that could move the hearts of others. The music spoke for her, telling a story of patience, resilience, and hidden talent that no words could convey. The household began to notice the change. The children stopped their games, watching in astonishment as her hands moved across the piano. The adults, who had laughed and whispered earlier, now turned their attention to the sound filling the room. Their expressions shifted from amusement to surprise, and some even showed signs of regret for having underestimated her. The maid girl's heart swelled with quiet pride, but she did not pause. She continued to play, letting the music flow freely, knowing that this was her moment, her chance to be seen for who she truly was. The notes filled the room with emotion, rising and falling in a way that captivated everyone present. The laughter and teasing that had marked the morning were completely forgotten, replaced by awe and admiration. The maid girl felt a deep sense of satisfaction, a confirmation that her hidden talent was something powerful and undeniable. She realized that she had found her voice, not through words, but through the music that had lived inside her all along. By the time she finished, the room was silent except for the echo of the last note. She sat back, hands resting gently on the keys, and looked around. The children stared at her with wide eyes, the adults with a mixture of surprise and respect. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of the morning lifted, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and recognition. She had turned their laughter into something meaningful, something that they could not ignore or dismiss. She stepped away from the piano, feeling a quiet confidence that she had never known before. The room remained still, the household members processing what they had just witnessed. She realized that this was only the beginning, that her talent could no longer be hidden, and that the world around her might never see her the same way again. The maid girl had faced mockery, endured humiliation, and emerged with a gift that could not be denied. And in that moment, she knew that everything had changed. The living room was quiet now, the echoes of laughter and chatter from the earlier meal still lingering faintly in the corners. The maid girl stood near the piano, her hands trembling slightly as she traced the edges of the keys with her fingers. It was more than just an instrument. It was a gateway to a world she had longed for since she was a child, a world where her voice could be heard without shame or fear. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had nothing to lose. Today she would play. She lowered herself onto the piano bench, her heart pounding in her chest. The polished wood gleamed under the soft light from the chandelier above, and she could see her reflection in the black surface. A girl who had spent countless hours hidden away, unseen, underestimated, yet filled with dreams that had refused to fade. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the ivory keys, and then she let go of her fear, pressing the first note. The sound was clear, gentle, and full of emotion. She allowed her hands to move naturally, letting the music guide her. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, telling a story of hardship, perseverance, and quiet strength. She felt herself losing track of time as she became absorbed in the melody, the world around her fading away. The laughter and whispers that had followed her throughout the day were replaced by a profound silence, the room holding its breath as the music filled every corner. The children, who had been playing nearby, stopped in their tracks. Their mischievous smiles faded as they listened, captivated by the beauty that poured from the piano. The adults, too, turned their attention to her, surprised and unsure at first, then increasingly moved by what they heard. They had expected a simple girl, nothing more. Yet here she was, filling the room with a sound that was both powerful and delicate. Their eyes widened, their previous judgments melting away in the face of undeniable talent. Her fingers danced across the keys with a confidence she had never allowed herself to feel before. The music grew in strength, rising and falling like waves on a calm sea, shifting effortlessly between moments of soft introspection and bold, commanding phrases. Each chord she struck seemed to echo her own journey, the struggles she had faced, and the dreams she had kept secret. She could feel the energy in the room shifting, the air vibrating with the emotions that her playing stirred in those who listened. For the first time in her life, she felt completely seen. It was not just the sound of the piano, but the way it allowed her to express everything that had been bottled up inside. The ridicule, the teasing, the endless days of being underestimated. All of it was transformed into music, into something that could not be ignored or dismissed. She realized that she had been underestimated not because of her lack of ability, but because no one had taken the time to see her for who she truly was. The children in the room whispered among themselves, astonished by the skill and emotion in her playing. They had thought of her as quiet, simple, someone to laugh at when she wasn't looking. Now they saw a different side, one that was full of life, creativity, and confidence. Some of them glanced at the adults, seeking confirmation that what they were hearing was real. The adults' expressions ranged from shock to admiration, their earlier amusement replaced by a deep respect that could not be denied. As she continued, she allowed herself to smile slightly, a feeling of joy bubbling up within her. She was no longer the girl who had been laughed at. She was a musician, an artist, someone who could create beauty and command attention through her own talent. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice that could speak in ways words never could. Every note was a declaration, a message to those who had doubted her that she was capable, worthy, and extraordinary. The room seemed to pulse with her music. Even the furniture, the curtains, the chandeliers seemed to hum in harmony with her playing. She noticed the subtle reactions of those around her, the slight nods of the head, the widened eyes, the hands clutched in amazement. The laughter that had haunted her earlier was gone, replaced by awe and respect. She realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a revelation, a turning point that would change how she was seen forever. Her mind drifted to the times she had played in secret, when no one was watching. She remembered the quiet afternoons in her small room, fingers moving across imaginary keys, dreaming of a day when her music would matter. She thought of the elderly gardener who had quietly encouraged her, the one who had told her that talent could not stay hidden forever. His words seemed to echo in her mind, giving her strength as she played with abandon, letting her soul pour through the music. The melody shifted, becoming softer, more introspective. She allowed herself to convey the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. The fear, the loneliness, the longing, and finally, the hope that had kept her going. Each note carried a piece of her story, and she could see the reactions of her audience changing with each chord. Some had tears in their eyes, others were completely still, unable to move, caught in the spell of her music. She realized then that she had the power not just to be heard, but to touch the hearts of those who listened. Time seemed to stretch as she played. She did not know how long she had been at the piano, lost in the flow of her own creation. She was aware only of the music and the profound connection it created between her and the listeners. She felt a sense of liberation, as if the years of ridicule, invisibility, and self-doubt were melting away, replaced by a newfound confidence that radiated from her very being. She had finally found a space where she belonged, where her talent could shine without fear or hesitation. The final notes of her piece resonated through the room, lingering in the air like a gentle echo. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart still racing, her breath slightly uneven from the intensity of her performance. For a moment, there was complete silence. The children looked at her in awe. The adults stared in shock and admiration, and even the staff who had been quietly observing seemed moved by what they had just witnessed. The maid girl sat there, a small, quiet smile on her face, feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride that she had never known. Finally, the silence was broken by a slow, appreciative clap from one of the adults. It was followed by another, and then another, until the entire room was filled with applause. The sound was overwhelming, yet it was also affirming. She had turned the laughter and mockery of the morning into something beautiful, something that could not be ignored. She realized that this was a moment that would stay with her forever, a turning point in her life where she had claimed her own voice and shown the world her true worth. The children came closer, their earlier teasing forgotten, their eyes wide with admiration. They asked questions about the music, about how she had learned to play, about how she could create something so beautiful. The adults nodded in respect, some offering words of praise, others simply shaking their heads in wonder. She listened quietly, accepting their admiration with grace, yet feeling a quiet pride that was entirely her own. She had done this for herself, and that made it all the more meaningful. She stepped away from the piano, her fingers lingering on the edge of the keys for just a moment longer, savoring the connection she had felt with the instrument. She realized that this was only the beginning, that her journey with music was far from over. The respect she had earned today was not just for her performance, but for her courage, her determination, and her willingness to rise above ridicule. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that talent and passion could not be contained by social status or preconceived notions. As she moved through the room, returning to her tasks, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The piano had given her a voice, and she knew that she would never again hide her abilities or her dreams. She had shown that even someone underestimated and overlooked could possess extraordinary gifts, and that those gifts, when revealed, could change how the world saw her. The laughter and mockery of the past were no longer relevant. What mattered now was the truth she had revealed through her music. That evening, as she finished her work and prepared to rest, she felt a sense of contentment that she had never known. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and allowed herself to shine in a way that no one could deny. The piano, once a symbol of longing and secret dreams, had become a bridge to a new life, one filled with possibility, recognition, and self-respect. She knew that this was a turning point, a moment that would be remembered, and she carried it with her in every step she took through the house, every task she completed, and every quiet thought she allowed herself in the days to come. The room remained still, the echoes of the final note hanging in the air like a delicate mist. The maid girl had risen from the piano, her hands trembling slightly but her heart lighter than it had ever been. For the first time, she felt that her secret was no longer hidden. The music she had carried inside her for so long had finally found a voice, and it spoke louder than any word or glance ever could. The audience in the room was still stunned by the unexpected brilliance of her performance. The children, who had once mocked her, now looked at her with awe. Their eyes followed her every move, curiosity replacing mischief. They whispered to one another, pointing at her hands and the piano keys, trying to understand how someone they had laughed at could produce such beauty. She caught their gaze for a brief moment, and a small, quiet smile passed between them. She saw that even in their young minds, the power of her talent had made an impression that could not be erased. The adults in the room were equally astonished. Their earlier amusement and condescension had been swept away by the music, replaced with genuine admiration and a touch of embarrassment for having doubted her. Some of them exchanged looks, silently acknowledging the error of their previous judgments. Others approached her, hesitant at first, but eager to express their respect. The maid girl accepted their words with quiet grace, feeling a warmth in her chest that was entirely new. It was a recognition that went beyond polite acknowledgement. It was a deep, authentic appreciation for who she was and what she could create. As she stood there, absorbing the reactions of those around her, She realized that the piano had given her more than just a platform for her talent. It had given her confidence, a sense of self-worth, and a glimpse of the possibilities that lay ahead. She thought of the countless hours she had spent imagining this moment, playing in secret, dreaming of a day when her music would matter. Now that dream had come true, and it felt even more powerful than she had imagined. One of the children approached her hesitantly, their earlier teasing completely forgotten. "How did you learn to play like that?" they asked, eyes wide with wonder. She smiled softly, remembering the quiet lessons she had received as a child, the patience of her parents, and the encouragement of the elderly gardener who had always believed in her. "I just practiced a lot," she said simply, hoping that the answer would inspire them as much as it had driven her. The child nodded, eyes shining, and ran off to tell the others about the magic they had just witnessed. The adults, too, were eager to speak. They asked about her training, her experiences, and how she had developed such skill and emotion in her playing. She answered humbly, careful not to boast, yet there was a quiet pride in her voice. She knew that her words, while simple, could not fully convey the depth of her journey. It was the music itself that had spoken the truth, a truth that could not be denied or ignored. The realization that her talent had the power to change perceptions filled her with a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond the applause she received. As the evening continued, the household began to view her differently. Tasks that had once been taken for granted were now met with subtle signs of respect. The children no longer whispered or giggled behind her back. Instead, they watched her with a newfound curiosity and admiration. The adults treated her with greater consideration, their words carrying a tone of genuine appreciation. She moved through the house with a quiet confidence, aware that the music had transformed not just the way others saw her, but the way she saw herself. In the days that followed, the impact of her performance lingered. Guests who had been present spoke of it in hushed tones, impressed by the unexpected display of talent. The family members began to invite her to play again, sometimes simply to hear the music, sometimes as a way to include her in moments they had previously reserved for themselves. Each time she played, she felt a sense of liberation and joy, a confirmation that her place in the world was not defined by her role as a maid, but by the abilities and passions she nurtured within herself. The maid girl also noticed a subtle change in herself. She walked taller, moved with more assurance, and approached her daily tasks with a renewed sense of purpose. The fear and hesitation that had once accompanied her every step had been replaced by confidence and determination. She realized that her talent was not just a gift, but a tool that could shape her life and the lives of those around her. The music had given her a voice, and with it, a sense of freedom that she had never known. The elderly gardener, who had always been a quiet source of support, observed her with a knowing smile. He had seen the potential within her long before anyone else had, and now that potential was fully realized. He approached her one afternoon as she tended to the flowers, offering words of encouragement that resonated deeply. "You have shown them what you are capable of," he said softly. "Never let anyone make you doubt your worth again." She nodded, grateful for his guidance and wisdom, knowing that his belief in her had helped carry her through the moments of doubt and ridicule. As the seasons changed, the maid girl's life continued with its daily routines, but with a subtle difference. She was still responsible for her work, still moved quietly through the house, but there was a new energy surrounding her. People treated her with respect, curiosity, and even admiration. The children, inspired by her example, began to explore their own talents with enthusiasm, and the adults recognized the value of nurturing creativity in ways they had not before. The house itself seemed to resonate with a new kind of harmony, one that reflected the joy and inspiration that her music had brought. She continued to play the piano whenever she could, each time discovering new depths of emotion and expression. The music became a refuge, a source of comfort, and a way to communicate feelings that could not be put into words. It was a connection to her past, her dreams, and the person she had always been inside. Each note she played reinforced the truth that she was more than her role in the household, more than the judgments of others, and capable of creating beauty that could touch lives. Over time, the maid girl noticed that her influence extended beyond the music. Her confidence, patience, and resilience began to inspire those around her. The children learned to treat others with more kindness and respect. The adults became more attentive to the talents of those in their care, and the household as a whole grew more harmonious. Her music had opened a door not just for herself, but for a ripple effect that changed the environment she had once found stifling. Despite all the recognition and admiration, she remained humble. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there were still challenges to face and lessons to learn. She approached each day with diligence, grace, and a renewed sense of purpose. The piano had given her a voice, but it was her character, perseverance, and quiet strength that allowed her to use that voice meaningfully. She carried herself with dignity, knowing that true recognition came not from applause alone, but from the respect she had earned through her actions and talents. One evening, as she played a new composition she had created, she noticed the family gathered quietly in the corner, listening intently. They had once underestimated her, dismissed her abilities, and laughed at her simplicity. Now they watched with reverence, absorbed by the emotion and skill she poured into each note. The realization of how far she had come, and how much she had grown, filled her with a profound sense of fulfillment. The music had changed the way she was perceived, but more importantly, it had changed the way she perceived herself. Her performances became a regular occurrence, each one an opportunity to explore new melodies and emotions. The piano became a companion, a partner in her journey, and a reminder of the moment when her life had begun to transform. The laughter and ridicule that had once weighed heavily on her were now distant memories, replaced by the joy of creation and the satisfaction of proving her worth through her own abilities. The house, once a place of quiet judgment, had become a place of inspiration and appreciation. The maid girl reflected on the lessons she had learned. Talent and determination could not be hidden indefinitely, and courage could turn fear into triumph. She had discovered that the opinions of others did not define her, and that her true value lay in her abilities, her dedication, and the integrity with which she approached life. Her journey was a testament to resilience, a reminder that even those overlooked or underestimated could rise to greatness when given the chance to shine. As the evening drew to a close, she stepped away from the piano once more, feeling a sense of peace and accomplishment. The room was filled with gratitude, admiration, and quiet awe. She had faced the laughter and doubt of others, embraced her talent, and emerged with a voice that could not be ignored. In that moment, she understood that her life had been forever changed, that she had crossed a threshold from invisibility to recognition, and that the music would continue to guide her through all the days to come. The days following her performance passed in a mixture of quiet routine and subtle excitement. The maid girl continued her daily tasks in the large house, moving through the polished floors, arranging flowers, and polishing silver as she always had. But there was a difference now, a quiet shift in the atmosphere that she could feel in every glance and word directed at her. The family and guests treated her with a newfound respect, no longer seeing her merely as a servant, but as someone with talent and depth that could not be ignored. The children who had once teased her now watched her with admiration. They followed her through the halls, asking questions about the music she played, the melodies she created, and the emotions she expressed. She smiled gently, answering patiently, realizing that she was inspiring them to see the value of talent, patience, and dedication. It was a subtle influence, but it brought her a sense of fulfillment. She knew that the lessons she had learned about resilience and self-expression were beginning to ripple outward, touching the lives of others. Her music became a regular part of the household. She would play in the evenings, allowing the melodies to fill the rooms and corridors, transforming the atmosphere from a place of rigid routine into one of creativity and warmth. Guests who arrived were captivated by the sound, often pausing in their steps to listen, some even asking to hear her play again. She accepted their requests with quiet grace, understanding that her music was more than entertainment. It was a bridge connecting hearts and emotions, a reminder that beauty could emerge from unexpected places. The family began to recognize her in ways they never had before. Small gestures of appreciation appeared. A kind word, a thoughtful smile, or a willingness to include her in conversations that had once overlooked her presence. She felt a sense of belonging that she had not experienced before, a confirmation that her abilities and character could command respect regardless of her social status. The experience had taught her that courage and talent, when expressed authentically, could change perceptions and create opportunities that words alone could not. The elderly gardener, who had always been a quiet supporter, continued to encourage her. He would speak of her progress with pride, noting the way her confidence had grown alongside her music. His belief in her had been a steady source of strength during her moments of doubt, and she was grateful for his presence and guidance. His encouragement reminded her that while talent could be recognized by others, it was the belief in oneself that truly allowed it to flourish. The Maid girl herself had changed in ways that were deeper than the reactions of others. She carried herself with a new poise, her shoulders straighter, her movements more assured. She approached her work with a sense of purpose, knowing that her contribution to the household went beyond mere tasks. Each action, whether arranging flowers or polishing silver, was performed with care and attention, reflecting the pride she now felt in her own abilities. Her inner strength had grown, and it radiated in every gesture and every interaction she had. Her music continued to evolve. She experimented with new compositions, exploring the depths of emotion that she could convey through the piano. Each note became a reflection of her journey, a story of perseverance, resilience, and the discovery of her own voice. She practiced diligently, not for recognition, but for the joy of creation and the fulfillment of expressing herself authentically. The piano, once a symbol of longing and secrecy, had become her companion and a source of personal empowerment. The household, too, adapted to her new presence. They learned to appreciate the value of nurturing talent, of allowing individuals to explore their abilities, and of recognizing the contributions of those who might otherwise be overlooked. The laughter and teasing that had once marked the Maid girl's life became distant memories, replaced by an environment of respect, encouragement, and admiration. Her journey had transformed not only her own life but also the lives of those around her, creating a culture of appreciation and support that had previously been absent. She also discovered the joy of mentoring others. The children, inspired by her example, began to explore their own creative talents, experimenting with music, art, and other forms of expression. She offered guidance when asked, sharing insights from her own experiences and encouraging them to pursue their passions with dedication and patience. This exchange of knowledge and inspiration created a sense of community within the household, where creativity and encouragement were valued alongside daily responsibilities. Over time, the Maid girl's reputation extended beyond the walls of the house. Friends of the family, neighbors, and visiting guests spoke of her talent with admiration, often sharing stories of her remarkable performance and the beauty of her music. Her story became a quiet inspiration, a reminder that hidden talents could flourish when given a chance, and that courage and dedication could transform even the most ordinary circumstances into extraordinary moments. She embraced this recognition with humility, knowing that her journey was as much about personal growth as it was about external acknowledgement. Despite the changes in how others perceived her, she remained grounded. She understood that her worth was not defined solely by praise or admiration, but by the integrity and dedication with which she pursued her passions. Each day, she continued to perform her duties with diligence, approach her music with sincerity, and interact with others with kindness and patience. The balance between her responsibilities and her creative expression allowed her to cultivate a life that was both fulfilling and meaningful. The Maid girl also reflected on the lessons she had learned about resilience and self-belief. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and underestimation, yet she had persisted. She had found the courage to express herself authentically, even when others might not have expected it, and in doing so, she had transformed her own life. The experience reinforced the importance of perseverance, of holding onto one's dreams, and of trusting in the value of one's abilities, regardless of the opinions of others. In quiet moments, she would sit by the piano, letting her fingers wander across the keys, creating melodies that resonated with her emotions and experiences. She found comfort and joy in these moments, knowing that her music was a reflection of her journey, a testament to the strength, patience, and creativity that had guided her through life's challenges. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a confidant, and a symbol of her resilience and self-discovery. The household flourished as well. The family and staff grew closer, learning to value each individual's contributions and talents. The atmosphere became more supportive and nurturing, a reflection of the positive changes brought about by the Maid girl's courage and creativity. Her influence extended beyond music, inspiring others to explore their own abilities, appreciate the efforts of those around them, and recognize the value in every member of the household. As the years passed, the Maid girl's life continued to evolve. She remained dedicated to her work, her music, and her personal growth. Her performances became a cherished part of the household, moments when beauty and emotion filled the rooms and created connections that transcended social roles and expectations. She had discovered a sense of purpose and fulfillment that went far beyond the recognition she received, a sense that her life was meaningful and her talents were valued. The Maid girl had transformed not only the way others saw her, but also the way she saw herself. She had learned that courage, perseverance, and authenticity could overcome ridicule and doubt, and that talent, when nurtured and expressed, could create profound change. Her music had opened doors, bridged divides, and inspired those around her, leaving a lasting impact that extended far beyond the walls of the house. In the quiet of the evening, as she sat at the piano and played, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the moments of doubt, the laughter, and the teasing that had once made her feel small. She thought of the encouragement she had received, the practice and dedication that had honed her skills, and the moment when she first allowed her music to be heard. Each memory reinforced the strength she had gained and the value of staying true to herself. Her music, her perseverance, and her character had combined to create a life that was rich with meaning and fulfillment. She had faced adversity, risen above it, and discovered the power within herself to transform her circumstances. The Maid girl was no longer defined by her role or the opinions of others. She was defined by her talent, her courage, and the beauty she brought into the world. Her story became a quiet legend, an example of how resilience, creativity, and authenticity could change lives and inspire others. As she played her final notes of the evening, a sense of peace and accomplishment washed over her. The music lingered in the air, a reminder of her journey, her growth, and the impact she had made. She rose from the piano with a quiet smile, knowing that she had claimed her place in the world, not through force or demand, but through the quiet strength of her talent, the courage to express herself, and the perseverance that had carried her through every challenge. The Maid girl had found her voice, her purpose, and her recognition. She had turned ridicule into admiration, invisibility into presence, and doubt into certainty. Her life had been transformed, and in doing so, she had created a legacy of inspiration, resilience, and beauty that would endure far beyond the walls of the house. She had proven, in the simplest and most profound way, that true talent and courage could never be hidden, and that the power to change one's life lay within the heart of those brave enough to pursue their dreams.